There's a moment when it's like, I don't know, it looked like a computer. You know when your computer goes into like screensaver mode
it was
and it's
screensaver.
like bubbles floating? Like that's what it was, screensaver mode the entire musical. Like what are we doing, guys? Hi everyone, welcome back to After Broadway, the podcast where we deep dive into anything and everything musical theater. I'm Tara.
I'm Stefania.
And in today's episode, we're talking about Tina, the Tina Turner musical. I was like, is it called the Tina Turner musical or just Tina the musical? But it is the Tina Turner musical.
A choice.
A choice.
To have Tina in there twice.
It's been 3 weeks since you've heard our last episode, but it's been 6 weeks for us. So we are back to recording. And this is the first show. Well, I saw Wicked, but this is the first show that we've seen together since we went on vacation. So we're kind of in like a slow-ish period right now because the current season in Toronto is about to end before the next season begins in September, August, I think end of August. But
summer festival season is kind of beginning.
Exactly. So like we're actually, when this episode is released, we will have just seen The Gatsby in Boston. So that will be probably our next episode. But then we are going to Stratford to see both of the musicals there, and Shawfest is on right now for their musical like summer season. So it's a slower period in the city, but it's kind of a festival time. Although the Fringe Fest is coming to Toronto.
Fringe soon.
We're hoping to see a show. So yeah, I don't know. There's like a lot going on, but also not a lot going on at the same time because also the current Broadway season like just had the Tony Awards, so it feels like that has like ended as well, even though it's very much still on. So we're in summer programming is the roundabout way of getting to that statement.
Exactly. You know, lots coming up.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But let's talk about Tina. This is a show that we actually talked about. Oh my God, Steph, what was it? The 2021 Tony episode that we did? Would that have been right?
We've honestly talked about Tina a few times. It is famously one of the shows that had managed to open in the 2019-2020 Broadway season before Broadway was shut down for a year and a half. So it was one of the only 4 musicals of that season that was eligible for those 2021 Tony Awards that took place kind of the September before Broadway ended up reopening. So we talked about it there. We also talked about it, I believe we did a full episode on bio jukebox musicals and kind of what those mean, and like what makes them good and what makes them successful and what makes them unsuccessful. So we did definitely talk about Tina there, but we hadn't seen Tina at that point. And now that we've seen Tina, I think we definitely have a new perspective on this show. We were also in New York, December 2019, when Tina was running, and it was one of the shows that we were like, oh, should we see Tina? And we were like, no. Yeah.
It's no longer on Broadway, but it is still currently running in the West End. So, and it's been there since before Broadway. So, 2017?
Well, Adrienne Warren, who originated the role on Broadway, also originated it in the West End. And did she win the Olivier there, or did she not?
Or
was it Caroline or Change? Was it Sharon D. Clarke for Caroline or Change?
She won the Tony, but also, as you said, that was kind of a weird year. It was also like, just to speak on that weird year, like Tina had 12 Tony nominations, and I think if it was in a different year, I don't think it would have gotten 12 Tony nominations. That's just a little sneak peek in what we're about to talk about. Let me look up Olivier. Production was nominated for 3 Oliviers, including Best Musical. I don't think she won, because I feel like it would say it here.
No, she was just nominated. Let me see. Who won?
Tina. Oh, I gotta scroll down.
I'm scrolling.
To the
Sharon D. Clarke, Caroline or Change won.
Oh, okay.
Won in 2019. The other nominees, let's list this. Sharon D. Clarke, Caroline or Change, the winner. Adrienne Warren, Tina, didn't win. Rosalie Craig Company, didn't win. Kelly O'Hara, The King and I, didn't win.
Oh my God.
So, you know, two people who won Tonys for those exact roles in that category as well.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Also, The King and I, like, that's so late I didn't realize.
I know it was a lot later that they went with it.
I didn't realize that Kelly did it over there.
Yeah, she did.
Huh. Adrienne Warren also could be entering the Tony conversation next year, but we'll save that to a little later in this conversation because I think we should talk about the show that we saw right now. So this is the touring production of Tina. We saw it at the CAA at Mirvish Theater. still has that split aisle. I think it will forever have that split aisle. But I will say we were decently like rear orchestra, but I thought those seats were great. And I thought it sounded really good in there.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I was looking around and we were, rear, side, mid orchestra. And I thought we had a wonderful view. And I think even if you were more extreme side to either side, you would have still had a wonderful view. Maybe back sides obstructed, but for this specific show, I don't think that would have impacted really in any way. There was nothing in those back pockets of the stage that would have been obstructed. And so I actually think this theater, especially in the orchestra, has really good sight lines. I think the balcony is a bit far back.
I was about to say,
personally,
I have not been in that balcony since the renovation, so I'd actually be curious to see, you know what I think could be good from up there? Moulin Rouge.
I agree. I think that might be fun up there. So maybe we should try and see it from below and above when it's here.
Yeah.
But maybe it'll be bad when it's here. I don't know. I saw Harry Potter and the Cursed Child from the balcony.
Oh, you did?
I had a pretty dead center seat when I saw it, but I felt it was pretty far back. But you got a really great view of those projections and kind of really beautiful stage pictures, but I felt it was pretty far back up there.
Yeah. We've spoke on this before, but the CAA at Mirvish is it's the largest theater in Toronto. It's bigger than almost every Broadway theater. It's got something like 2,100 seats, 2,200 seats or something like that.
So here's the thing. Since the renovation,
Less.
I believe it has less seats because in the balcony they put up a wall and there's seats behind it that they're just not selling right now.
Right.
Which is very interesting because I remember me and Shara went and we saw School of Rock and we ended up buying stools at the back because they were only $25.
Yeah.
And then we ended up moving up to just empty seats that were kind of further forward, but really, really far back. And then when I was up there for Cursed Child, I'm like, it looks different up here. There's something different. We're talking to an usher. We're like, are there more seats back there? He said, yes, they've put a wall.
Okay, this is actually, sorry, I'm just like reading this as is. This is actually interesting, but I'm on Mirvish's website. If you go into Mirvish's website, you can actually click through the theaters and like see information. And it says that this theater can be configured to 2,300 seats, 1,800 seats, or 1,200 seats.
Wow.
So I'm under the impression that we're probably at the 1,800 seat mark right now. But I guess if they take out that back wall of the balcony, we could go back to 2,300.
Yeah.
And it's
bigger.
current. Like, the picture that they show is the current picture of the theater. So, very interesting.
When I saw many, many years ago, this is not the right house for this show, but I saw Once, the Canadian production of Once there. Yeah. And they were not really selling the balcony at all.
I was up top for that, but it was like only the first like 10 or so rows were being sold.
Exactly. It was empty behind us. But yeah, they really only sold those first few rows of the balcony. And it's not, some of the other theaters will have the orchestra, the mezzanine, the balcony, and this just has 2 levels, basically.
Yeah. But the other interesting thing about this specific tour is that the role of Tina is split between 2 women. So Steph, I didn't really read this article, but I know you did. Yeah. So tell us about this.
So as we know, we were speaking about Adrienne Warren earlier. She sustained an ankle injury while she was doing Tina on Broadway. And I really, after seeing the show, I 100% agree. This is a really difficult and taxing role for one actress to take on and do 8 times a week. And
it's also 2 hours and 50 minutes. And she's basically on stage the whole time.
Yeah, no, she does not leave. The whole thing centers around her. And so instead of having a main Tina and let's say an alternate or a standby or someone who does, let's say, 6 and 2, they've decided to equally share this role between 2 performers, and they each do 4 performances a week in order to save the health of the actress playing Tina, which I think is so smart. And I think really is something that maybe other shows should be thinking about doing in order to make sure that our lead performers stay healthy and are able to continue in doing nice long runs of these shows.
Well, so something interesting about that, because I had the exact same thought. I think we're all pretty, like, we knew during the Dear Evan Hansen run that it started as 8 shows a week. It switched to 6 and 2. I know that, like, Elphaba is, like, kind of an interesting, like, I think it's mostly 8 times a week, but a lot of the times, like, a standby cover will go on.
Elphaba has a standby that's, like, ready at any moment.
Exactly. But when you do something like this, which I agree, I think it's an amazing thing to do for these actors to keep them healthy and getting to do the show as long as they want to. Like, if you were to do this on Broadway, how would you split for awards? You can't. Like, how does it work? Both people would have to be nominated for the same part.
Well, this is the question, because they do it a lot for kids, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you have like Billy Elliot or Matilda, those are roles that were split equally, or not necessarily 100% equally, but they cast 3 or 4 children to play that same role, and they're all considered the leading performer. I do think, let's say, awards bodies are willing to make a special exception for kids. They gave the 3 Billies the Tony for Billy Elliot. You know, that the Matildas got a special Tony. They weren't eligible in the regular category. I don't know. I think if you were to do this for a main show, you would kind of do it on the down low and only maybe announce it after. Like, you would have your main one, and then you would have maybe your standby, maybe doing 6 and 2 to start, and then once award season was over, you would probably shift to 4-4.
That would suck, though, for the person that's the standby. I know.
It's the job. But I think that's kind of how they would do it if they were opening a show with something like this. And also, you don't know how difficult a show is going to be or how taxing it's going to be until you have someone doing it 8 times a week, being like, I mean, you have an idea, but until someone is really doing it, being like, this is not sustainable, or seeing someone call out multiple times a week, or having to take so much time off, especially for a new show, which this was when Tina premiered in the West End and in New York.
I was going to say, I wonder what's happening in the West End. Do they have a split?
That's a good question.
They do. I see 2. I'm on the Tina website right now, and I do see 2 names listed as Tina Turner. So I would assume it's probably the same. Yeah,
if it's a 4-4, a 6-2, a 5-3.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's also interesting, like, reading this article. So the 2 actresses playing Tina on the current national tour are Zorin Villanueva, who we saw the other night in Toronto, and Ari Groover, who we saw in Little Shop of Horrors a few years ago. They both play Tina, and there's a quote from Zorin Villanueva who says, "Sharing the role is a great privilege. Often when you're the lead of a show, it's isolating, but in this case, we have each other's back." Like, there's someone else in the cast who knows exactly what you're going through, or what parts are hard, or someone to bounce ideas off, or say, oh, this part is really tripping me up. Like, what are you doing? What's your trick to get through that? I think there's, like, a nice support system to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about the show.
Wow.
What were your thoughts of Tina, the Tina Turner musical?
Wow. What a question. At the end of the day, I just don't think the show is for me. A bio jukebox musical is really a tough genre, and there are certain things that can make them successful, and I don't think this show really had any of those, except for, in my opinion, they nailed the curtain call. They did something that I've been asking. No, I'm serious. They did something that I always ask for a bio jukebox musical. You push the bows up as early as possible, and you just keep singing. You keep singing songs. There was like 2.5 songs after the bows.
It was like 5 minutes at least, maybe more, maybe 7.
I think it's like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Honestly. I really think it has an absolutely amazing final 15 minutes, because the audience are made to feel like you are at a Tina Turner concert. And at no other point in the show did I ever feel the high that I felt during the curtain call when the show was over.
I 100% agree. I think one of the reasons, I mean, there are probably many reasons, but I think one of the reasons that we never even attempted to see Tina previously before coming on tour is because we don't love a bio jukebox musical. You've heard us talk about this before. I particularly find with bio musicals versus jukebox musicals, the bio aspect is so much harder to get right. And I don't know that we've necessarily seen it perfectly done yet. I do think that my favorite bio that I've seen, which is comedy because everybody hated it, was The Cher Show. I think they broke that like mold of linear, which, as we said off the mic, this is a very linear story by having those 3 shares. So by having 3 people play the same character at different stages of your life, it's more like room to play. Actually, I take that back. My favorite bio version is MJ, because they chose the framing device of having a camera crew, in quotes, take us through a documentary style aspect of a very specific year in Michael's life. And I think choosing a specific time period helps you, because what I found extremely difficult with this show is that we started when she was a kid, we ended at like the world tour, right? Whatever that was when she was like 40 something. Yeah. And we didn't cut anything out. Like we chose to go through the entire story in 23 songs. Like, it's very long. And I think from what people have said previously, although this seems to be a pretty, like, I don't want to say loved musical, but like a lot of people don't have the problems that we seem to have with it, is if your star isn't a star, then I don't know what this show is. And that's really hard to have all of that like on one person specifically.
It's very interesting because Tina is on stage basically the entire show. She is truly the center of this show, and yet I feel like we don't get to really know her or get to know anything personal about her. Everything kind of just happens to her or happens around her, and she doesn't really have a lot of agency in what's going on, which I understand. In her life, she didn't have a lot of agency about what was going on, but I really feel like we didn't get a lot of her inner thoughts, her inner life, like her motivations and anything. Even something as simple as at one point when they brought in a choreographer for, this is in Act 2, but at one point they brought in a choreographer to show her the moves, and she says, "I've always done the moves." And I'm like, have you? Have you always done the moves? Yeah. Why haven't we shown this? If this is what, she was such an electric performer, she always just knew what to do to make the crowd go crazy. Why haven't we seen that development of that? Why haven't we seen, because that's what made her special, why haven't we seen her discovering that, developing that the relationship with the crowd, knowing how to perform, teaching people the moves? Like, if that was her gift, why haven't we seen that? She's like, "I've always done the moves." Where have we seen this? You can't just tell us. You need to show us.
We saw it in like one scene when they're doing that like chicken arm thing, but it was very fast, and it turned into like a fight scene at the end of the day. I also think on the same vein of that, like, the introduction of the name Tina Turner almost felt like a throwaway to me. It was like Ike had brought up a poster that was like the Ike and Tina Turner review, and he threatened her that like, if you don't use this name, like, I won't work with you anymore. I won't do this. I won't do that. And it's just like, okay, then we moved on. There was never like anything else to that. She like quickly lost her real name. And
I think, unfortunately, that is just the truth. I
know, but I understand that, but also like we're in a musical, so like
I know,
bring in the fantasy elements. Like they brought in the fantasy element with like the Buddhism, which I thought was a very interesting choice to start your show that way,
like right off the top.
But I didn't remember, but going back and looking, because there's obviously the very famous movie What's Love Got to Do with It, starring Angela Bassett as Tina Turner. She does that chant that happens throughout the show in that movie as well. It's just not as like prominent. Like, that's basically the theme all throughout this musical, is this like chant that her backup singer, dancer, like tells her this to like help her get through whatever she's going through with Ike. And I just don't know if that was the correct framing device to like have us believe in like the Tina story. Like, that's really all we knew about her, was that she practiced Buddhism. And if that's the only thing that you want me to know about Tina, then like I think you missed the mark on that.
Yeah, it just, everything was around her, and I wanted to just hear from Tina more. Yes, sometimes I wonder, I know Tina was involved in the development of this show, which is sometimes hard, especially because it is really sensitive subject matter. And you want your subject to be happy. Tina Turner died last year, but she was still alive during the development and the premiere of this musical, and I know she saw it. So, that clearly was something that was so important to her and like helped her through these trials that she went through in her life. And so she probably felt it was very important as something to like ground the show. But again, I agree that I don't think it really worked as a device to guide us through the show. Having her grandmother character kind of come through and continually sing that chant.
Well, at one point you're like, who's this? Like,
I literally was like, who is this?
Like, she comes in at the very beginning of the show for like a couple scenes, then it's like insinuated that she dies, but then she comes back as like, I don't know, a hallucination for her.
Yeah.
I think her mom says that she died.
force.
I think that's the reason that she comes to live with her mom and her sisters because the grandmother died. I believe that's what I took away from that storyline, but I could be very wrong.
Okay, I don't know. Didn't she... No, I'm just thinking...
She's wearing the same costume, so that's why it's hard to tell if she's alive or dead.
Yeah.
Because we also get, like, her younger anime comes through, too, as, like, hallucinations. And obviously, like, she's still... Like, Tina was still alive. So, like, I understand exactly what you're saying. And I do agree that, like... It's a blessing, but it's also a curse when the subject of your musical is a part of the creative team, because it's a blessing because you get their blessing on this show and you get to hear real life stories from the actual living, breathing person. But at the same time, I think it's a curse because you feel as a creative that you have to do what they say to please them in the sense of making the musical. And I think that's where we lose a lot of the narrative structure of these biomusicals, is because people are afraid to take a leap when the subject matter is still heavily involved. So I get it, but I also feel like sometimes you have to take more creative liberties and try something and then maybe see if it fails. Because it just feels like they didn't try anything here.
It brings me to the question, and I think we should be asking this question about every show we see, is like, what is the goal here? Like, how do we want audiences to leave feeling? Why are we telling this story? What is the purpose of telling this story? And how are we going to tell this story? And I don't quite know if they had a clear vision for what we wanted audiences to feel or what kind of story we wanted to tell. Because
we should also say this book was written by Katori Hall, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright. So it's not like the person is a nobody. You know what I mean?
This is a qualified person. This is a very talented
and it's also
person.
Directed by Felicia Lloyd, who is also
Felida
Lloyd, who's also a very qualified person.
100%.
Directed Mamma Mia.
For me, the movie. For me, my question is, I guess so that last 15 minutes, I've already said, were iconic. It felt like I was at a Tina Turner concert. I was brought
right, but I'm going to stop you for a second because
tears.
It was actually only 5 minutes of the show because the rest of it happened after the curtain call. So I do not consider that part of the show.
I know. But that last, 15 minutes I was in the theater while the lights were down were amazing. And I feel like when they decided to do a Tina Turner biomusical, people were picturing that moment of the show. People were picturing, her singing Proud Mary with the backup dancers in the mini dress and the wig and the audience cheering and screaming. But when you look at her life, at her career, that only happened to her in her 40s. Later in her career, she went through so much to get there, and most of it was not glamorous, was not fun, was not enjoyable, and it is absolutely a story worthy of being told. But when you're advertising your show as come party with Tina Turner, and then you spend the first hour of your show watching her being like beat up by Ike Turner, I was like, I don't quite know if they understood, or not understood, but I don't quite know if they put it together in the way that they were envisioning. Because I really think that when they were like a Tina Turner musical, no brainer, we're all going to sing and dance to Proud Mary, we're going to sing and dance to Nutbush City Limits, forgetting the journey that we have to go on to get there.
Well,
and those two parts were not connecting.
During the show, at intermission, we were talking about the fact that like Proud Mary is the second last song before the act break. And that number is right after Tina almost overdoses on Valium. She's taken like 50 pills and she's pushed on stage to sing this song, Proud Mary, which everyone loves. And here we are like cheering on
the
woman who literally almost died 10 seconds ago.
I was in shock. I was saying to you earlier, but I listened to this podcast, Celebrity Memoir Book Club, and earlier this year they did their episode on Tina Turner's memoir, I, Tina. And I'd listened to it then, but I re-listened to it this morning just to kind of, compare to the story that was told. in the musical, and they spoke about this moment where Tina felt like even though she was so unwell, so sick, she had to at least step foot on stage and pass out on stage so she would meet the contractual obligation so that Ike would get paid. Like, that's kind of the relationship, like, that's kind of the mental state that she was in, and it's tragic. I like, you just feel terrible the whole first act of this show, because, as you should, because it's a kind of a horrifying story to be telling, but the juxtaposition of that with the audience, you know, really, like, being primed to dance to Proud Mary, you know, was what didn't work for me.
This is why I feel like this show should have more of those, like, fantasy elements in it, more of those, like, fantastical moments. I'm
almost
thinking
like
this
Summer.
is like almost like Summer, yes.
Almost, which we didn't like, but like, you know.
We didn't, but also, like,
we didn't like this either.
Summer was 90 minutes. This was 250. Like,
Here's the thing, though. Summer felt 3 hours.
It did.
But it
also,
wasn't.
like, it was day one of the pandemic, so, like, everything felt crazy that day. You know what I mean?
March 11th, 2020. What a time. What a time.
But this is, like, a bad comparison because it's obviously, like, a fantasy moment in this musical. But I'm thinking of the Sparkling Diamond sequence in Moulin Rouge. And how, same thing, Satine is sick. She's basically dying. And when she has that moment, although very dramatic, but she has that moment where she, like, breathes in, gasps the air. She hears her voice in echo.
Do lighting.
Of, like,
they do a lighting
shine
moment.
bright like a diamond. We do lighting.
She's isolated.
I would have preferred that, because then it's not the audience like, this is my favorite song, I've heard this every single time. It's like, oh my God, I'm watching this woman do something to survive. She is on stage to survive, to have that, like, moment of a career. I just feel like they didn't do anything with their lighting, with their soundtrack, with their noises to make me feel that, like, this was a like, I physically saw her struggle. I saw her get hit on stage, but we got nothing internally.
So much work.
We got nothing internally.
But the acting, like, the performer is doing so much work to get that moment across, but the staging is not helping her. The directing,
zero.
The sound is not helping her. You're just relying on that performance, and it's a beautiful performance, but it's a big space, and you need to really make that impactful to the person at the back too. To everyone.
Only time that I felt, oh, this is kind of doing what I thought it was going to do was right after she sings Proud Mary. She sings, what's that song? The Act 1 finale?
I Don't Want to Fight No More.
She sings that song. No, but that's when that projection screen goes full bright white and she's running in front of it. I was like, okay, finally, we've had a light trick to show us that she's, like, in pain, that she's trying to run away from the situation. I just feel like,
we're doing something a little impressionistic. Everything else was so literal. The whole show was so literal.
The actors are literally showing me that she's struggling, but everything around her is doing nothing. And I think that's actually the biggest flaw of this production. I also think,
like,
go ahead.
I think the conclusion we're coming to is that it's poorly directed. Like, this is a poorly directed show.
I think it's poorly written. I think the book is actually poorly written, but I also think it's poorly directed.
Like, it's not structured well.
No. But it also brings me back to, and I spoke on this very recently about how projections can be used correctly. This was another use of completely incorrect use of projection. Like, I'm talking horrendous projections. There's a moment when it's like, I don't know, it looked like a computer. You know when your computer goes into, like, screensaver mode,
it was
and it's
screensaver.
like bubbles floating? Like, that's what it was, screensaver mode the entire musical. Like, what are we doing, guys?
It reminded me kind of you haven't really been to, like, dance recitals, but at dance recitals...
No, but we did this, like, when we were at camp. We had, like, flashing light background on the
site. Basically, you're just doing something in the background, so it's not an empty background. The AV guy, whatever button he can press in the booth,
back. Yeah.
You're just kind of like, I guess we'll do little circling squares for this number, because...
And I think that, like, it makes sense now that, like, you know, when these actresses say that they or when they decide that they need to split the role into two, and these actresses say that it's the hardest thing they've ever done, is because they're doing so much work because no work is being done around them.
They're carrying this show on their back. The actress playing Tina is carrying this show on their back.
It's it's pretty crazy. I also want to, we've both read, gonna shout him out here, Glenn Sumi's Toronto Star review. I feel that he's the only person that feels
I
the
agree,
same way that we
honestly,
do.
100% with this review. I agree 100% with this review. I think it's a really great review.
He gave it a 2 out of 4. We'll get to our ranking later. But there's a moment in this article where he talks about Beautiful the musical, and he says that one of the issues with this musical, and I 100% agree, is that Tina did not write the music to...
I was literally going to bring up this exact same point. I 100% agree. Keep going.
To all of these songs. Whereas in Beautiful, as we know, Carole King wrote everything, and if she didn't write it alone, she wrote it with somebody, and that character is on stage with us, like, writing it with her. So... For that reason, the songs in Beautiful feel like they fit better into the show because we're watching her write.
They reflect Tina, what was going on in her life at that time. Like, they reflect the struggles she was going through.
The song, I Can't Stand the Rain, I heard laughs when that started because she's standing outside in London, it starts raining, and then she sings, I Can't Stand the Rain. That doesn't work for me, guys. The other song that doesn't work for me, which I think is a fantastic Tina Turner song, is We Don't Need Another Hero. And she is scattering her mother's ashes. Why? Like, I just don't understand it. And for that reason, I'm like, you know, the hits are the hits, which is fine. But when you're giving us a lot of these songs that, like, if you're a Tina Turner fan, you know. But if you're us, who is just a casual Tina listener, I don't know half of these songs
I know the hits, but
in
that's
this musical. So if you're trying to get me to believe these songs, believe this character, you need to do more than just like have it rain on stage and she sings I Can't Stand the Rain. Like, I just don't see how this works. And I also think that this is the fault of a jukebox musical a lot of the time, and this show has fallen into that mold. Not
every artist's catalog of music caters to a jukebox musical about that artist. And I 100% agree with what you're saying. What Glenn Sumi is saying is that because she is not a songwriter, the songs that we are required to use for this bio jukebox musical do not reflect her life's journey. They were, you know, I know she wrote Not Push City Limits, but a lot of them were songs written by other songwriters brought to her, or written by other people brought to her to record because she had this stunning voice and was an amazing performer, which is fantastic. Well, also,
this
she is a stunning performer.
This is part of the story of
we see songs being brought to her, meeting
exactly,
songwriters.
And also,
we see
like,
that.
She says, like, she can't perform certain songs because Ike owns them, right? Like, she wasn't allowed to perform the songs that she always performed because she did not have the rights to do that, and he was threatening her, blackmailing her, and threatening to sue her for everything. So I understand, like, storyline wise why they just like slot these songs in, but I just don't think that they did a good job doing that.
These were, you know, these are songs not telling her story, and we forced them to tell her story. And we always talk about in a jukebox musical, sometimes, you know, you have to have the hits, so you have to kind of work a story around the song as opposed to working the song around the story, which is what happens when you're writing an original musical, or even similarly to, you know, Carole King and Beautiful, a Carole King musical, because she was writing about her life. When you're at that life moment, it makes so much sense for her to start singing the song that she wrote at that time about that life moment. And it's a wonderful moment of emotion, of catharsis for the characters, for the audience. But here, it doesn't quite work in the same way. It's very interesting.
I also thought, like, so as you're saying, like, when she goes to London and they're showing her the demo of What's Love Got to Do with It, right? And it's a very different version than what she wants to sing. But then when it comes time for her to actually sing it, I'm like, we wasted that moment. We completely wasted that moment on a 2-person scene with this man that she is now in love with, which, as the audience, we just met him for the very first time.
Erwin.
We know nothing about him, and they're singing this song, and I'm just like, what a waste. Like, what a throwaway. I also was, like, upset that we spent an entire scene building up to this, like, showcase for Capitol Records, and then they didn't show it to us.
We never saw it.
If what the marketing team is saying is that everyone's here to see that she's a, like, incredible performer, like, show me. I want to see that. I want to see all that I don't know. I just felt like it was weird. There were many times that we turned to each other and we're like, what's happening right now? Like, I actually cannot follow what's going on.
which is odd because it was so linear. But yeah, it was just, you know, you're when you, and I think that's why maybe MJ was successful, because they picked one point in his life and then kind of told other stories by branching off of that. And I also, you know, talking about bio movies, I do think it's more interesting to pick just certain moments in a person's life and how everything that's happened before then impacts that, as opposed to, you know, trying to tell, you know, a birth to death story about a person. Especially because birth to death stories about people don't follow, you know, narrative structure. They don't make sense storyline wise. They don't have a beginning, middle, and end the way that a satisfying musical or movie or story needs to have. And this definitely felt like, okay, this is what happened in her life, but we're not getting that satisfying arc. The ending is triumphant. Like, I cannot say enough how wonderful the ending is. Like, I literally cried. I was in tears when she sang Simply the Best, because I was like, finally, this is what I've been waiting for. And I feel like this is what the whole audience has been waiting for.
Two things here. The first thing, just to answer to what you were saying there, we always talk about narrowing your focus when it comes to musicals, and I think that this is a show that specifically needs to narrow its focus. And again, if you want to focus mostly on her like religious aspects, that's fine, but then I need more of what she's thinking along the way, instead of just like guiding us through these chants and not actually hearing her own thoughts. Yeah. That's that part. Secondly, I think I agree with you. I think the last 5 minutes when she gets up on stage, when we open up the stage, when we see the stairs, when we see the full band, and she's like singing Simply the Best, I think it's amazing. I think that curtain call is amazing. We've seen it before. We've watched many YouTube videos leading up to like seeing it here
years ago.
Over the years. We've been watching these for years. And I think it's also something that, like, you know, oftentimes like you're allowed to film that curtain call, so that's what people are seeing. And if that's what people are seeing, it would make me want to see the show. But then when I go to the show, I'm actually not seeing any of that at all. I think it's just a bad marketing ploy. And I also think
different from what the show is.
I also think that it leaves you with that feeling of like, oh, did I actually like this show? Was I wrong about everything that I felt for the 2 hours and 40 minutes before that? Or
if you nail an ending,
like, what is it?
People are willing to forgive so much. If you really nail the
I'm not willing to forgive.
No. If you really nail it, but truly, you know, what happens at the end of a show is what you walk away thinking about, what your lasting impact is. If something is not as strong in the beginning, but they really nail that ending, you're much more likely to have a positive impression of something than if the beginning is great and the ending kind of, you know, doesn't work. That ending is the most important part. And this show nails the ending. It nails nothing else, in my opinion, but it nails the, you know, that concert sequence is what I'll call it, where she enters to sing Simply the Best in Brazil. And then, you know, you do the curtain call and then you come back and you just are essentially at a tribute concert, an impersonator concert. Yeah. Which is great. And I've never seen Tina in concert, and I imagine this is what it feels like.
Well, that review ends with, like, Glenn Sumi says, you might leave the theater humming the tune Simply the Best. Tina Turner was. The show was not. So, like, I don't disagree with that. Something else that he writes about, which I agree, is there's so many characters that walk in and out of her life, but we know nothing about them. Like, where's Ronald? What happened to him? Like, did he ever come back for the kid? Did he ever do anything? Like, I want to know about that. Raymond? Is that his name? I don't know. What's his name? I was calling him Ronald in the music when we were in the theater, but maybe it was Raymond.
I believe his name was Raymond. I think the kid is named Ronald.
Raymond, correct. The kid is...
One of the kids is Ronnie.
Ronnie and Craig, yes.
Yeah, Craig is the older one. Ronnie is Ike's son.
Right, so we know nothing about these children. Nothing.
No, there's another element that's not even in this musical, which is fine, but Ike had 2 children with another woman that, like, Tina ended up raising. Bizarre.
That the show would be 3.5 hours.
No, we can't touch on everything. I
also think that we don't get enough.
Like, when Raymond came in, I'm like, who's Raymond? When he's like, I'm in love. Who's Raymond? Never met this man before. We enter into their relationship in the middle of it.
But it's the same thing of, like, she has no relationship to her sons. Like, there's that moment when in the second act when she's on the phone with her sister and one of the kids talks to her on the phone, but the other kid won't. And she's like, he's still giving me the silent treatment. And I'm like, okay, why? Like, talk to us about why this is happening. Like, why isn't he talking to you? Like, I don't understand why you're just introducing these characters. Rhonda, for example. This woman is a tour manager that Ike sleeps with, I assume, or tried to sleep with. That's how she gets the job.
That's what they implied.
But then she has many scenes with Tina about, like, I'm not leaving till you leave. She becomes her own tour manager when Tina, like, does a Vegas review. Like, when she's basically a nobody at that point, she says Vegas is where, like, you know, singer's graveside. Like, that's where they go to die, singer's graveyard. Yeah. And then she goes off to London and she meets Roger, her, like, new manager. And it's like, okay, bye, Rhonda.
We never see Rhonda again.
Like, I just don't understand why we're introducing these characters. They sing one song together to close the chapter, but then we never see her again. I really don't know what they were doing here with the book. I really don't.
Well, I think they maybe, like, towed too close to reality and not understanding that we as an audience were like, Rhonda. Like, we miss Rhonda.
Yeah.
That was who we loved.
Same with, like, she did not have a good relationship with her mother, who I actually think, shout out to Roz White, who played Zelma. I thought she was a standout in this show. And when we get to that, like, hospital scene and they're, like, trying to have a heart-to-heart, and I know I'm supposed to feel something, but I absolutely do not, because you showed up for 5 seconds in her life and that was it.
No, I know, like, a good performance, but yeah, I was, like, not a fan of her mom, who I understand her mother was in also a difficult position, in an abusive marriage, in an abusive relationship. But yeah, like, she left her daughter. I don't even know if that's exactly what happened in real life. I don't quite think it is, but they maybe simplified it for the narrative. But yeah, as an audience, it's hard to feel, like, sympathy, as at the beginning of the show, the first impression of this character is her leaving her daughter to her abusive husband.
And not to be this person, but if you spend an entire musical with Ike, and for the first half, I know that we do not want to see him in the second half, but I actually think we need to, for structural narrative purposes. There were a few times where,
like, he was in the background, but, like, I
noticed,
we need more.
But, like, I needed a monologue. I needed something from him to, like, further, like, push this story forward. I just felt that, like, as I said earlier, it was like, okay, here's a headline about Tina Turner. Actually, I don't know if I said this on the mic. Maybe I did. Maybe I said this off the mic. I'm not even sure. But it's that they took all of these headlines that were in the news about Tina, and then we saw, like, a tableau on stage, and then we moved on to the next headline, and then we did it again, and then we did it again, and then we did it again. I just don't think that this story was cohesive at all, which, again, is crazy because it was linear. Like, I really don't know what happened here.
Yeah.
They were nominated for Best Book of a Musical.
There were 3 musicals. There were 4.
And the book that won was also trash.
Was also bad. But Moulin Rouge was also trash. Bad. Shout out to The Lightning Thief, whose book was actually, in my opinion, not bad.
The best. I think it was the best of the 4
it was
that
actually
are here.
A pretty good book. Whatever. Yeah,
because it's based on a book.
Well, because it's based on a book, it had, like, you know. I actually think it was a pretty good book. I do think it was a pretty good book. Okay, not to really relitigate that. Go back 4 years in the archives and it's there. Yeah, Act 1 is so Ike heavy.
And again,
because her life was.
But shout out to Dion.
Oh, he was great.
Relaford Lee, because he was great. He was really good.
Great. He really did it. He wore those wigs. Oh my god, not the wigs. The mushroom cut. Sorry, I'm just reminded of when she spends, like, 10 minutes in that leopard hat. And we're like, what wig is under there? No wig. No wig was under there.
It was a wig cap.
It was just a wig cap. Because they were like, they would change her wig on stage, which I understand is fine. But she came out looking bald because she had this hat. And it was, like, kind of
right before the biggest showcase of her career. She's wearing this, like, leopard, like, newsboy hat.
With a matching leopard jacket. Anyway, sorry, back to Ike. Act 1 is so Ike heavy, and it really... This is going to sound, like... It sounds bad, but it really drags the show down, and I understand this was her life. It's so tragic, and I don't know how else to tell that story.
I know, but we're not watching a documentary.
No, I know.
So it's a really hard adapt.
thing. I don't... it's a really hard thing to do. I actually think writing the book for this musical is really hard because she had such, a difficult life and went through this kind of horrifying relationship. And the first half of her career was really, she was stuck in this horrible relationship. She was being abused, not just physically, but sexually, financially, just in every way you can think of. She's being abused. And I just don't think that story makes for a feel-good musical. And maybe you're saying, well, it's not meant to be a feel-good musical. But by the way that they staged the second half and that ending, it is meant to be a feel-good musical where she's like overcoming, this past. And I just don't know if like all the pieces fit together for them to quite nail this like overcoming moment. Because she, that first act is so heavy with like Ike's specter over it. And even in one moment he's singing a song and I'm like, I don't want to hear from this man. Like I agree, but you have to. Like I know, but he's like singing like an apology. I don't know what he's singing, but I'm like, I don't want to hear from this man. I hate this man. I don't want to hear from him.
I know what you're saying. I just think that I think part of the issue with the narrative is that we lose him in Act 2. And I understand, we just said that he is in flashback, not flashback, he's in sequences in her mind. Yeah. But because we're not getting anything internally from her, you don't actually know what she's feeling at all. About him. Having him be such a huge presence and then completely removing him from the second half just feels incorrect to me.
I do agree. I agree with that. But yeah,
it just doesn't feel.
Maybe he doesn't need to sing.
No, he might not. I think at the beginning he does. When you first meet him for that very first time.
But what's the song? Because I think it's "Be Tender with Me, Baby" near the end of Act 1. And when he's singing, I'm like,
who's he singing to? I literally don't even remember.
I think to Tina. I'm literally like, get this man off the stage. I don't want to hear from him. I don't need to hear his perspective.
The other thing, too, is that, here's the thing. I said this at the beginning. What's Love Got to Do with It, the movie, is a fantastic movie. I've seen it a couple times. I had to watch it in school for, drama. I think we did, a project on it. I can't remember. I believe it was, awards worthy, no?
Yeah. No, I believe Angela Bassett was nominated for an Oscar for this.
Why didn't we just take that and put that on stage?
Because we need a jukebox musical. Because we need to be able to... They could have done that. Sing.
It's still about the same person. I swear they're singing in that movie.
I'm sure there is singing, but singing is singing in the way that a play with music has, not in a propelling the story forward.
I saw something, but now I can't remember what the first musical was that was listed. Oh, I saw a review that said that this show started out as The Color Purple, and then it gave Dreamgirls vibes, and then it gave something that completely different. I was like, yeah, I agree with this. But I don't think it works because they're very different shows. I also think we have kind of a large ensemble here, and they are so underused in this musical. It's I don't even know why they're here if they're going to be that underused. Yeah, I don't know. It just really did not work for me at all. And that's really all I have to say on that. We didn't even talk about the woman that we saw, that she was a star, right?
Zeren Villanueva, a star. She's amazing. She really she
longest legs I've ever seen.
So tight, so long and
lean.
These amazing legs, especially, which I really felt were put to amazing use right at that ending moment where she's kind of doing that tribute concert that last 15 minutes.
Honestly, what it made me think of, nothing against her because I did think that she was very good, but all I thought the whole time was wow, would have loved to see Adrienne Warren.
Sure, absolutely.
Which, let's quickly talk about Adrienne Warren here before we move on to our ranking of this and obsessions. So, as I just said, Tony's just happened. Congrats to Marilee. That's really all we have to say here. It's been a whirlwind for us and that show. But the day of the Tony Awards, there was an announcement that Adrienne Warren is coming back to Broadway. Now, flashback to an episode of us earlier this year, maybe last year, of Adrienne Warren was supposed to be in Room on Broadway. That was canceled for, I think, was it producer reasons? Something happened.
I think it was funding. I think they lost their funding.
Yeah.
Which happens all the time, but
I saw Room
in the process.
In Toronto, I don't know that show needed to move to Broadway, but I think everyone felt the same way that they probably felt about Tina of like, Adrian's a star, and if she's in it, people will see it type thing. Well, on the day of the Tonys, it was announced that for the very first time ever, the last 5 years will be coming to Broadway with Adrian Warren as Kathy and Nick Jonas as Jamie. And now you might think, wow, Tara's probably really excited about that because she has talked about the Jonas Brothers many times on this podcast. I actually am like horrified by this. And I actually am so upset that for the very first time that the last 5 years is on Broadway, it's featuring Nick Jonas.
I'm a big Adrian Warren fan.
I don't get it.
I think she can definitely sing these songs, but we need to talk about Nick Jonas. I don't think he's capable of singing these songs.
His Shiksa Goddess is going to be horrible.
And also culturally off.
Incorrect. Like,
there's
it's
many
incorrect.
things there.
This man's father is a pastor in real life. Like, I just don't get it.
Yeah, I guess I'm really curious about the casting decision on this. Do we think that this star casting will get people to the show? It probably will. But I do also think he's in a different celebrity position than he was in when he did, let's say, How to Succeed.
Which I ran to when he was in. But also, like, a different stage in my life. He was, like, 17. I was, like, 15. Like, it's been, like, 15 years. I am 30 now. I don't want to see Nick Jonas in this show. And we won't, because I won't pay to see that. But, like, here's the actually, like, maybe if there was a really cheap ticket, just to see how it would be. But I only am bringing this up, too, because for a long time, the rumor was that it was Joe Jonas and Ashley Park. Which I actually think might have been better.
I still don't know about Joe, but I'm interested to see what Ashley Park would be able to do with this. Like,
I don't know.
We're always getting amazing girls in these.
But I will say that, like, Joe's lived more life than Nick had.
A divorcee, unlike Nick. But Nick still has time to make this happen before the show starts.
Divorce?
You never know. Next year.
No, but what this did lead was into a conversation online of that next year's Best Actress in a Musical category is out of control. It is Nicole Scherzinger, Audra McDonald. Idina Menzel is now coming back to Broadway. Who else? There's a bunch.
No, there's a lot that I'm
Adrian Warren.
Blanking.
Did I see Leah Salonga on that list too? I don't know what she's doing, but I thought I saw her name. There's also still rumors that Casey Levy will be coming with Next to Normal.
But they just started the West End, so I'm not sure. Is Boop coming?
Right.
Floyd Collins, who's in that?
I don't know. That show's
maybe
weird.
Happy Ending. Who's in that? Once Upon a Mattress. Sutton Foster.
Oh, Sutton Foster.
Sutton Foster. Who's doing Pirates of Penzance?
Oh, sorry. Megan Hilty, Jennifer Samar.
Smash.
Like,
Death Becomes Her.
Death Becomes Her. Whoever's playing, it could be, what's her name? Robin Herder. Like, it's wild.
What about Smash?
Smash is Robin Herder.
Right.
If it's Robin Herder. Like,
if it's
we
Robin
don't
Herder.
even know.
Pirates and Penzance, Redwood, Smash. Oh, Stephen Sondheim's Old Friends. But I don't know if that really counts here.
That was Bernadette, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know who's doing it.
Oh, it was Bernadette and Leah Salonga.
And Leah, I think that's who's doing it here.
Like, guys, this is a crazy season.
It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really fun. I'm excited.
Also could be, it could be, what's her name? What's Andrew Barth Feldman's girlfriend's name? She's in that show with Darren Criss.
Yeah, maybe Happy Ending is...
Is that what it's called? The Robot? I'm actually maybe interested in that. And I think that could help us fill a slot in our, now what turns out to be not the right weekend that we're going to New York.
I know. It doesn't quite say here yet on Helen J. Shen.
Yes. There's a lot happening. This has nothing to do with this episode at all, but we have been obviously talking about like what's happening in New York. And for last fall when we went, it felt like nothing new was on, whereas this fall is only new. Like, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like it's everything that was kind of like in the works pre-COVID has finally like made itself. Like, Swept Away is coming. We've been talking about this show forever.
What else is coming? I'm on the Wikipedia.
The Tammy Faye musical without
Andrew
Rannells.
Without Andrew, not Andrew Rannells. Sorry, not a different Andrew. A different Andrew. Yeah, not Andrew Rannells because
they announced it without a contract.
So funny of them. Yeah, Tammy Faye. It's out of play. What's A Wonderful World? Do we know anything about that? It's a jukebox musical, a Louis Armstrong jukebox musical.
So, James Monroe Iglehart did that out of town.
Yeah, in Chicago. I'm trying to see if I see anyone else
Also,
that I recognize in...
Gatsby could be coming next season.
Could
the
be
other
Gatsby.
Gatsby.
An American Myth, I believe, is the subtitle. Gatsby, An American Myth. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season. This past season, I mean, we'll see how it shapes out. But this past season was very full, but nothing really thrilled me besides Merrily. Even of things I didn't see, so I'm hoping some more things really thrill.
The Outsiders thrilled me, but maybe I shouldn't be publicly saying that right now.
No. I think
there's a lot of discourse online.
There's a lot of discourse. I think The Outsiders, you know, The Outsiders thrilled a lot of people, but I think what the consensus was this past year was...
There wasn't a standout.
No book was perfect. No music was perfect. Like, nothing had all the elements.
Except for Merrily.
Except for Merrily. But that's, again, different. So I'm hoping this season there are some shows that, you know, are firing on all cylinders, that have all the elements working together.
Here's the thing. I don't know how it's going to be, but I am thrilled that Smash is coming to Broadway. So, like, we are going to have to make a trip in the spring because, like...
I know.
I have to see that show. I have to.
I know. We're, I think, going on October, and so maybe we'll start planning.
For my own personality, I have to see that show. Like, it's just been part of my life for so long.
For full circle moments.
One of my coworkers is currently rewatching Smash, and he's having a great time. So, very happy for him. But let's get back on... Well, no, we watched it in 2020 for our
I know, I was going to say, I haven't rewatched it since early pandemic, 2020. We really deep dived.
Okay, let's finish this off with our ranking of Tina. Okay. What are you giving it?
So out of 10, I am going to say 4 out of 10, her wig that she wears at the end. 4 out of 10.
I'm giving this 3 out of 10 fringe dresses.
Fringe dresses?
I just don't think, to me, a curtain call does not save a show.
No, I'm
sorry.
If you watch Adrienne Warren videos doing it, the dress she wears at the end is different, and I like the one Adrienne Warren wears better. It's like a chainmail also.
The wig is bigger and higher and different. You know what else I think of when I think of Proud Mary? Miss Congeniality 2.
Okay, random.
When, like... Okay. Sandra Bullock and oh my god, what's her name?
Regina King? Is Regina King?
Yes, and Regina King are at like a drag bar and they're dancing to Proud Mary with like a Tina Turner impersonator, which at times this is what that musical is.
This is what this was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we are.
And with that, Tina, the Tina Turner musical is playing in Toronto until July 28th. There are rush tickets. And they are cheaper than Wicked rush tickets, so that's a good thing. Let's look. I have it open right now. The rush tickets, same day, are $39 for weekday, I believe, and $69 for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I believe is like that's kind of what they've been doing. But that's also a big price jump in between like a Thursday and a Friday.
It's a big price jump.
There are cheap ways to see this. Again, that theater is big, so there's definitely more seats available for this run, and you still have a few weeks to see it. So, and then it's probably coming to a city near you if you're listening to us in the U.S. So yeah, that's our thoughts on Tina, and it's now time for our obsession of the week. Okay, Steph, what's your obsession? I feel like I know it. I think it's something that you saw last night.
Something I saw last night. Last night, I was at the National Ballet of Canada. I saw Jules at the National Ballet of Canada, and it was beautiful. Just talk about it a little bit. Jules is a ballet that premiered at New York City Ballet in 1967, choreographed by George Balanchine, and it's 3 acts. And it's a unique ballet in that it has no narrative whatsoever. It's really just beautiful dance, but it is a full-length ballet that's able to be presented. And what was really unique about last night is that it's very rarely presented all together. A lot of times you'll see just emeralds, just rubies, just diamonds, but to see all 3 together is somewhat rare. The last time Toronto's had it was, I think, 2006. So really a privilege to be able to see it here in Toronto. So the way George Balanchine choreographed it was each act or each segment, each small ballet is inspired by a different jewel. So the first act is emeralds, and then also it was inspired by a city and the style of dance. So the first act is inspired by emeralds and the romanticism of Paris. The second act is rubies, and it's inspired by New York City, and it's very jazzy. And the third act is diamonds, which is inspired by St. Petersburg, Russia, which is almost like, you could say, one of the homelands of ballet and of dance. My favorite act, it is very Anastasia. To be honest, like, my favorite act was Rubies, because it was so much jazzy, so fun. The music was really upbeat. It was like Stravinsky music. It has different composers for each act, so they feel very different, and the costumes feel very, very different. My favorite was Rubies. It was so much fun. But during Diamonds, there's a moment where there are 17, pairs on stage, and and I was sitting so high up, and to see these 17, pairs of dancers, so 34 dancers on stage, literally just walking forward, doing the simplest moves, and I teared up because it was so beautiful. And the audience was just like, wow, they were walking across the stage, but because everyone was doing it, like, the impact that it had for all of these dancers to be moving together so beautifully was so wonderful. And I think we're really lucky to live in a city like Toronto that does have really, like, a world-class ballet company here, and to be able to see ballets here. And if you don't like the ballet, you can still go and close your eyes and listen to a world-class orchestra playing at the same time.
I think where they practice is, like, pretty close to where I live.
I'm not sure. I think they have a lakeshore studio. Work,
I see the girls dancing in, like, the window.
That might be something else, because I know their main studio is by Lakeshore.
Okay.
Because
maybe
I've looked,
like
you can do, like classes and stuff
something.
there, but...
Or maybe it's for the younger, like, up-and-coming, like, National
maybe.
Ballet of Canada girls, because they're, like, teenagers from what I see.
It's possible. I don't really know. But yes,
funny.
So...
Sometimes they walk over there with, like, their tights and shorts and buns. It's very cute.
That's funny. This show is over. It ran for just a week long, but we have next season on the back of the playbill on the program. So next season, the show that I'm excited for in the fall is Giselle, which is about, like, a scorned wife. But North American premiere of the 4 seasons. Swan Lake is returning next year. Guillaume Cote is retiring next year, so there's a whole, like, program dedicated to his retirement. Anna Karenina next year. I saw a different production of Anna Karenina here, so I think this is actually a different one because it says North American premiere. So really fun stuff on the horizon for next year. And what I will say is I got rush tickets online 11 a.m. the day of the show, and they were $40. There are a couple of other discount ways. They have a program called Dance Break for under $35, but if the show is pretty sold, they don't usually run that program. And then the other program that they run is standing room day of tickets. You have to be at the box office at the time it opens, and those are $12, which we've done that before. So there are ways to get affordable seats.
If you forget your password, check your junk mail.
Okay, I had a password situation with this.
Well, and also sometimes your tickets are sent to your junk mail, so check your junk mail. And also sometimes your tickets are sent
to your junk mail. Okay, which is what happened to me, and my password reset email sent to my junk mail. Okay, way to call me out. On air.
I'm just telling the people to check their junk mail if they forget their passwords. Because literally the day before we were at Tina and... Oh, it's thundering outside. But literally the day before we were at Tina and Steph was like, I cannot buy these tickets because I cannot remember my password. And both of us did not think to check the junk mail.
No, never occurred to me in my life. Never occurred to me at all. I had 100 emails in my junk mail being like, reset your password, reset your password, reset your password. So anyway.
So sometimes tickets go to your junk mail.
Anyway, Jules at the National Ballet, really beautiful. Highly recommend if you're a big musical theater fan but haven't been to the ballet to check it out and see something new, see something different. Sometimes it has a story, sometimes it doesn't, but it's beautiful dancing and beautiful music every time. Tara, what's your obsession this week?
My obsession this week is also from a show that closed last Sunday. Wow. Which is another jukebox musical, The Heart of Rock and Roll. And the reason I want to talk about it here is because I actually loved this musical. I thought it was so fun. And I think we are victim to this too. We criticize things because they're not, like, high art. And I think that sometimes we need to stop doing that and just have fun at a show when it's meant to just be fun. And I do think that that's why a lot of people did not see the show. But what I do want to say is this is a jukebox musical, and I think I talked about it very briefly, but I barely talked about it. It's featuring Huey Lewis music. And
Yeah.
I think that this is some of the best integration of songs into a book that I've seen in a jukebox. And it's sad that people didn't get to see it, but they did release a cast recording, which just came out. I also think that this is a tour dream show. It is a dream show to tour, so I hope that they get to do that soon, because it's really a really fun time. It's actually funny, because my brother Tyler was just in town for a couple weeks, and I told him the other day that the Heart of Rock and Roll was closing, and his first response was, why? I liked that. And he doesn't see that many shows, but like that's the vibe. It was just a fun time. So my obsession this week is the song, super popular, Hip to Be Square. But the reason that I loved it is because this is like, I would say, the unofficial opening number. There's like an overture plus like a dream sequence opening number, but this is the first big opening number with all of the cast, and they're singing this song, Hip to Be Square, and he works for a cardboard box company. It fits perfectly. It is a like very does not take itself seriously show. It reminded me of Kinky Boots, which we love Kinky Boots. It's just like a really fun time at the theater for family, and I'm sad that it's closing. Also, I think it's the best Mackenzie Kurtz has ever sounded in a show, and Corey Cott is Corey Cott. So
he has beautiful arms.
He's got beautiful arms in this show. He's also wearing like really good Levi's jeans in this show. It's like an 80s dream. Like there's a bubble wrap tap number. Like I just don't understand, guys. Not everything needs to be that serious. It's just like interesting to me because I think we had talked about this. Maybe it was our Tony episode when you were talking about like Lempicka closing, and it's like this show gave us exactly what we wanted, and we still hated it. We've been asking for like new music, new story, new everything, and everyone was like, oh, don't like it. And I'm like, this show, The Heart of Rock and Roll, gave us nothing new that we asked for except for a fun time with great music, and we still said, sorry, not gonna buy a ticket. So I don't know why this one didn't work. I thought that like Huey Lewis would be enough to bring people in the theater.
I think it just didn't have enough of a log line. It didn't have enough of something to bring people in.
You know what I actually think is the problem? I think everybody, and we've said this before, but I think new shows that are like lighthearted and fun really need to take a page out of Shucked's marketing campaign and getting the like influencers to back your show, because I truly believe if this show was on TikTok, people would have seen it. Sure.
I also wonder if this might have had better success opening in the fall than in the spring.
I think they did rush themselves here to be fit in this season, and I do agree, because in the fall, when you're kind of like, I don't know what to see, there's like nothing really like going on right now, you're like, oh, I guess I'll go see a Huey Lewis jukebox musical, because why not?
In the spring, it gets lost, and it was dismissed pretty immediately as not an awards contender, which is fine. It doesn't have to be an awards contender. Awards are not everything, but the spring is a really, really busy time, and everyone has a million things to see and focus on and talk about. And if you're not in that awards conversation, you kind of get forgotten about immediately. And if you open in the fall, this past fall or this upcoming fall, you have a bit more room to breathe. You get to be the only game in town, like the only new show for a few weeks. Whereas in the spring, you're the only new show. I don't know. I think they opened the same night as Cabaret, so they didn't even have their own special night.
Yeah, they were. So I was in New York for that like opening period, because this was the first time that I had seen the like opening night was a Friday, the gala was a Monday type thing. So like press was invited to the Monday, embargoes were lifted on reviews. And this is the thing, like, this was one of the highest reviewed shows of the season. Like, the critics loved this show. The book is tight. Like, it's very good. It just, I think you're right. I think it gets lost in a sea of, like, gotta get in before Tony deadline, which they did, and maybe that was, like, to their detriment. It's funny, because I was reading a little bit about, it had an Out of Town with Matt Doyle and Katie Rose Clark in the same too, and it got really good reviews there, too. Like, so it's not that the show is bad. I think it just had a bad opening. Like, that's what I think happened. It opened at a bad time.
They didn't consider the timing of the show.
And maybe that's for, like, a number of reasons that we don't know.
Yeah, there's a million things. If a theater, sometimes you're counting on a theater. You don't want to be paying rent on a theater and then waiting to open for 6 months. That costs so much money.
That was also the first time that I had been to the James Earl Jones, and not a bad seat in that theater. I also paid like $30 to see this show.
Can't complain.
So I think that also like helps the experience, because it's like it was cheap and it was fun. It was a great time. So I'm sad that it's closed, but I do think that there could be potentially a life. I also think that this would be a really good show to license for schools. There's a lot of characters in it, and when you get to have like fun music, fun costumes, like it's really
familiar music,
familiar
to parents
songs,
or
yeah. So I think like high schools, universities, like regional theaters, like license it, get it on the road, guys. Let's get it going. So
I agree.
That's my obsession this week. That's our thoughts on Tina, the Tina Turner musical. And I think our next episode is Gatsby, A Great American Myth. Woo! I'm so excited but so nervous at the same time. We're really nervous about Isaac being in, but like I'm so excited to see this show because there's a lot of buzz around it. Everything that I've read online, which is like very minimal. Paul Wontorek saw it the other day. Did you see that?
I did. I think you sent it to me.
In Paul, we always trust, and he said this is his new obsession. So I can't wait. But yeah, if you want to listen to any of our other episodes, like the other Gatsby episode, you can listen to our podcast wherever you find podcasts. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube, and don't forget to like the video and leave us a comment.
You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Off2BOA Podcast with the number 2, and also on TikTok at Off2Broadway. Follow along. Maybe we'll post some road trip content. We'll see.
Yeah. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.